Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow's E-Forum. Well, my guest today is a man who needs no introduction at all. He's seen this movie that we're all currently starring in at least 8 times before. To be precise, this is the sixth financial crisis, fifth healthcare crisis, and third supply chain crisis. So if anyone has an inkling how things will pan out and what businesses need to do, it's him. Ladies and gentlemen, Leaders of Tomorrow's E-Forum brings you the legendary John Chambers, the former executive chairman and CEO of Cisco Systems and the founder and CEO of JP Ventures now that focuses on helping disruptive startups from around the world build, scale, and of course, get on to great successes. With that, let me introduce John Chambers to you. John, lovely to have you and a very good morning.
Sonali, very good morning to you. It's an honor to be with you. Your introduction was very kind. I hope I can deliver on the expectations of your audience.
A man who's seen so much. I mean, in your introduction, I just told the audience, I told the participants who've been dying for this session in terms of the number of crises that you've navigated. If I could ask you to juxtapose what we're going through right now and all the previous crises, what would you say?
Well, I think the first one is to realize that it's been 12 years since our last major economic crisis. So the majority of leaders have not seen this before, whether you're a leader of a small company or the leader of a very large company. So it's a new experience for them, and it's important to know what you know and know what you don't. Secondly, the rule books in terms of how you deal with crisis, both economic crisis, pandemic, supply chain, are very replicatable. I just think of it as a playbook and a series of activities you follow. My parents were both doctors. They taught me early on, deal with the world the way it is, not the way you wish it was. And then you look forward to how you survive the crisis. On surviving the crisis, rule one is realize how much of it is externally put on you, but also if you were doing things right, you've got to fix those at the same time. The second is that you as a leader be visible, communicate very openly. If you don't know an answer to something, be candid with your employees, your market, your customer set. Then you develop your playbook, 5 to 7, I like odd numbers, major platforms or focus areas you're going to focus on. One is obviously expense management and cash preservation. One is how you interface to your customers. One is how you interface to your employees. One is also beginning to paint a picture of what you look like as your North Star as you come out of this. You then communicate regularly to your employees, to your customers, to your shareholders, to your partners, what you're doing on those parameters. You assume they're going to last longer than you think. It always does, and deeper. You try to make all your changes one time, but you develop a scenario B and C plan in case it gets tougher. And then you begin to execute very quickly. Speed is your friend, not your enemy here. And the worst thing of all is continuing to do the right thing too long. So you come through these crises, and we will come through this one as well. I'm a realistic optimist. This is probably the toughest economic one in terms of depth. Too early to tell how long it's going to last with the mixed signals in the marketplace. Then you want to think about how you come out and how you position your organization for the future. And this is when you break away. Almost all successful large companies, especially in the tech industry, broke away from their competitors during the tough time. And it doesn't mean that there won't be a lot of job destruction and companies left behind, but that's kind of the basic rules in terms of the economic crisis.
I would like you to share some real life examples. Today, if you look at the scenario for business owners, founders, SMEs, MSMEs, the future looks a bit bleak. There seems to be no light at the end of the tunnel. They're cash strapped. I wouldn't want to be in their position. It's a hard position to be in. And I'm sure you get that more than anyone else. What would you say to entrepreneurs like that? How do you know whether you have to be persistent, hang on, bootstrap and carry on, or you need to pivot? How do you look at your business model and say, hey, listen, should I hold them or should I fold them?
So the sequence you raised them, and that was an excellent way to put it. You want to be realistic on the market, and you want to be realistic on your customer. If you're selling to the consumer in the US as an example, it's a tough go right now. If you're selling business to business, it actually started turning up in the last 4 weeks. As you think about where you are, you want to be realistic. Have you major changes that need to be made? It does not do anybody any good by waiting too long to make the changes. You try to make the changes one time, not fold them, but make the changes one time and give it your best effort in terms of what you're going to look like when you come out. Only about half the startups will make it through this transition. And I want to be very realistic. In 2008, 30% of the startups made it through the Great Recession. In 2001, the dot-com bubble, 50% did not. So you want to be realistic. If you don't change, you will get left behind. The moment of doubts, because you want to be certain your moves are right, yet there is no certainty in today's market. You make the best call the way you can, much like a doctor would make the best call on a patient. You then are committed to making the changes, and you give all your efforts to make it happen. If it isn't working out, then you have to have the courage to fold them. So while Cisco got dramatically stronger after the 97, 98 Asian financial crisis, and we doubled down in Asia at a time that the tiger economies were slowing, everybody else backed away. 18 months later, I had number one market share in every major Asian country. 2001, I got knocked on my back. The pain, I can't tell you, for the leaders, the loneliness. You're sitting, literally, I was sitting on the roof of my house wondering, are we going to be able to get through this? There are moments of doubt, and you've got to be realistic. The reason there's doubt is you're not sure. And this is one that a leader cannot be sure. You just have to base the experience, listen to your advisors, then move quickly. 2001, I made the decision that the market was going to be much worse than everybody said. I said that this is a 100-year flood. I made my decisions. I got surprised by the numbers. I was surprised. I made my decision, made all the changes in 51 days to the entire organization. Day 52 started gaining market share. An optimistic one is I saw the Great Recession coming of 2008. We saw it slow down in the summer of 2007. We made the decisions to cut back on expenses at a time that others did not. When the Great Recession hit 9 months, they criticized me in 2007 when I got very cautious. We were in a position that others were not. We powered through that. We gained number one position in world automotives because nobody else would even loan them money to purchase their equipment. We trusted the automotive companies. They were great customers during good times. I felt that make it through this. I took a risk. If it hadn't worked out and we'd wrote down a couple $1 billion in inventory, probably would have been a new CEO. I did 180 acquisitions, 12 of them for over $1 billion. One of them, $600 million, a flip camera capability, a little device that you could do camcording, internet to the video to the internet, great for home consumption of video. I was a little bit ahead of the times there. But when we started to grow, Steve Jobs held up his iPhone on stage, held up our flip camera and said, these are two of the greatest devices ever. And I really want to congratulate Cisco. It's a wonderful device. We're going to give it to you for free on the iPhone. It was game over. I knew that within 60 days, even though our numbers were still reasonable, I knew I had to fold him. He outmaneuvered me, and we wrote down 600 million. That is what leadership is about, making the good, tough decisions, at times very painful. And it isn't a question of being right or wrong. You take good business risk as a leader. Some of them work, some of them don't. And when they don't, you have to either adjust very quickly or, to your point, fold them.
What do you look at first? Do you ensure that you hold on to your customers, or do you hold on to revenue? I mean, it's a tough one, because if you have to hold on to customers, there is some letting go of your revenue as a short-term investment, but it's a very, very tough call to take when you're already bleeding and almost drowning.
Let me start with the almost drowning. I wrote a book, Connects. It's one that, Sonali, I will send you with an autograph and key notes. I opened the book by sharing the experience I had at 6 years of age. And I was fishing with my dad in a river called Elk River. And he went upriver and he was fishing. We'd been fishing for about an hour. And what did I do? I got too close to the edge. I fell in. And when I fell in, panic set in, just like the business leaders you talked about. I knew I was in trouble. I was thinking, I'm going to drown. And my dad from way upriver yelled, hold on to the fishing pole, hold on to the fishing pole. And he started running toward me. And each time I came up from underneath the water, struggling to get air, grasping to survive, he yelled, hold on to the fishing pole. Well, what did I do? Obviously, he was concerned about the fishing pole, felt that I was not going to drown. So I held on the fishing pole with both hands, kept popping up. He ran down about 200 yards downstream, swam out, got me, pulled me out of the water. And as I was grasping for air, he said, "Do you understand why I asked you to hold on the fishing pole?" I said, "No, I think you wanted me to save the pole, right?" He said, "No. When you're in trouble, you cannot panic. You have to stay focused. You got to control your fears. Not to have fear is not being human, but you've got to focus it and determine what is realistic and how do you handle through it." So the leaders, the first thing you got to do, it is about survival. And you don't kid yourself. Don't have false confidence. Survival, you've got to reduce your expenses. You've got to see how long your cash will last you. For my startups in the US, I'm trying to get our cash position up to 20 months, to 24 months. We may need it that long. And with your revenue dropping, to your point, less cash is coming in. So you have to build off of a conservative, very conservative revenue. Don't have false hope that it'll return back to where it was before. It will not in the short run. Then you've got to focus on your employees, getting your employees focused on what they can do in each of your 5 to 7 priorities we talked about, whether it's interfacing to customers or expense management or preparing for the future, so they understand your North Star, where you're going to go. Then with your customers, you communicate to them where you are, how you are dealing with this crisis, what you're going to look like when you come out. You look at them in the eye and say, "I believe I can make it through this. Here's how we're going to do it." To your point about sales, you've got to focus on your existing customers. First focus is don't lose. Don't let the customers churn. That is the easiest return and your best path to recovery. Second is to upsell an existing customer is about 1/10 the effort of getting a new customer, especially during a downturn. So you focus on upselling your existing customers. Then for your new customers, you're probably going to have to put 3 to 4 times the amount into your pipeline that you did before to get the same amount of revenue out. And then you deal with the world realistically where you are. You give it your best shot to get through it. And you begin to, as you start to get through it, where my startups are now, you then say, what are my steps to emerge stronger and to break away? And then you catch the optimism of your employees and the company, and you begin to execute on it.
Keeping cost down is a key part of surviving. I think this is a question that many entrepreneurs will resonate with. An answer from you would make them all listen with great perspective.
You have to keep costs not only down, you have to do it in every aspect of your business to survive. And the way you manage through crisis is dramatically reduce your expense run rate, dramatically reduce your expense outlays, etc. And you look at everything and every lever you can touch. Let me give you an example how important this is, even for companies that are growing well. I have several AI companies, artificial intelligence in the customer experience arena. One of them, a really exciting Indian company, Unifor, led by Umesh, who's amazing. But he's growing at 300% right through this crisis because he provides call center capability that makes the call centers more effective, allow the agents to work from home, et cetera, on it. And yet he is reducing his expenses, cutting the expenses across the board, being very tight, and he'll hold them till he sees his way going through this. So he isn't going to spend during the downturn until he's clear on the upturn segment. For some of my other customers that were growing at 20 or 30%, the new normal, some other startups in areas like Internet of Things, the new normal is sales are down 30% versus what they were before. In those customer situations, they did layoffs. They reduced the salary of their employees. They positioned themselves to come back out the other end. And then they're navigating through that. And the company I'm just now talking about is starting to get its activity picked up and look like it's crossed the chasm and on out. But expense, not only management, but frugality is a key issue. And even when you start to see your way through it, do not step on that gas and start spinning again. You need to have a new definition of productivity. And this is how the companies who survive will become larger and larger companies.
My question to you is simple. Who will survive and who will die? Because there will be a lot of casualty. In your opinion, where will be the surprises and where will be the disappointment?
Leadership is lonely. Shimon Peres from Israel, the late president, taught me that 25 years ago. The ones who survive will be led by strong leaders. She or he who's leading the company may not view themselves as a strong leader. You develop more during the tough times and being realistic on your mistakes than you ever do during the strong times. Jack Welch, the leader of GE, probably the best business leader in the generation before me, basically taught me you would never be a good leader or a great leader or have a good company or great company till you had a near-death experience. I didn't realize that when he told me in the late 90s. I realized that in 2001. And he called me up at the end of 2001 and said, John, you now have a great company and you're a great leader. I said, Jack, it doesn't feel like this. There are days I don't even want to go to work. My employees have doubts about my ability to lead. I've gone from what many people were saying at the level to one of the best CEOs ever. Now they're saying, should I even be able to run Cisco? Even some of my strongest supporters are challenging me, including some members on the media who had said unbelievably nice things about me 10 years, now saying, John, should you keep your job? And I navigated through that. And he called me up at the end of 2001. He said, now you have a great company and a great leader. John, you've done amazing. And I said, it doesn't feel like it. He said, John, trust me, Cisco and you will emerge much stronger because you went through this. He was right. But I said, Jack, you're going to be the only one who tells me this. And by the way, here we are 20 years later, he was right. He was the only one that ever said it. But looking into the eyes of each of your listeners out there, this is what leadership is about. This is where you become a stronger leader. Will you make mistakes? Of course. Will you ever be sure each move you're making is right? The answer is no. At times, and all, as you said so well. But what you've got to do is make your decisions quickly, make them one time, and move forward. This is when the great leaders in India will continue to be built, both at the business and the government level. This is where the great startups will occur. And just watching my two startups out of India, Lucidius, Saket Modi, and Unifor, Umesh as an example, they have emerged out of this stronger than they went in. And while Unifor is about 2 years ahead of Lucidius, watching just my young leaders develop and being very candid as a coach, a strategic partner, and investor, I get a stronger CEO at the end. And so I remind them of that when they're going through these lonely stages, because I've been there. I felt that. I know the uncertainties. I know the issue that you are scared you're going to make the wrong decision. But you've got to control that fear, keep the humbleness, and then execute very well. But don't hide. Don't be transparent. Don't think you can wish your way out of this. You cannot. It is about world-class execution, regardless of the size of your company.
Well, I have a question from a high-flying VC. He is Sanjay Nath, founder and managing director of Bloom Ventures, a luminary, a veteran in his space. And he asks you, there's a lot of pain in the ecosystem, cutting costs, keeping teams close, and managing headwinds plus tailwinds. What guiding frameworks would you advise to look at silver linings, creative innovation to the new things, white space opportunities based on shifting consumer and enterprise behavior? And how should we be thinking about this? That's a loaded question for you, John.
Yeah, it is. And thank you for calling it loaded, because it's a challenging one. I'm going to go in the reverse order. For the VCs, this is also an opportunity and a tremendous challenge. First, there got to be too many VCs around the world, to be very candid. And during this shakeout, probably 20 or 30% of them would disappear. Probably between 30 and 50% of the startups would disappear. For the VCs who are on their 10th, 12th, 15th fund, I call them up. I literally call up the Sequoias, the SLs of the world, the Andreessen Horowitz, and say, how do you manage through it and how do you approach this? The VCs do it similar to what I just shared about the startups and the other companies. They look at their portfolio. They look at how much cash they have left in their funds that they've raised. They realize that probably not all their companies are going to make it. They prioritize on the companies based upon the plan of the leaders to execute through it. They help the companies navigate through this transition. The majority of VCs, just like I gave the advice to the startups, will focus first on survival of their own companies before they do investments in new ones. Getting a new investment is hard right now. Very, very difficult to do. Even if you've got a great reputation and had great momentum going in, but your momentum has dropped, and the VCs are probably going to watch to see where they put their bets. However, this is when you do make bets on the companies that will come out of this very strong. This is when you have a chance to identify the next Facebook, the next Cisco, the next Microsoft, and you have a chance to catch the companies who are dramatically different that can break away. When I look at where I place my bets now, I look first, is there a market transition going on, a new business model, if you will, whether it's to consumer or business? I look at what are the new technologies like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, cybersecurity that can enable these new business models. I look at where customers are and how they're spending, which today is often about cost efficiencies, no longer about growth, no longer about innovation as much. And then I place my bets on those organizations that are most likely to come through it again very strong. So using Unifor as an example, I'm continuing to invest and invest a pretty fair amount, not just time and resources, financial resources into them as they transition through this. And whether they grow at 100% this next year or 300% isn't as relevant as how they position themselves for the future. But if I were betting, I think they're going to grow at 250 or 300%. So there's an example where they could become one of the top AI companies in the world. From a startup out of India, one of the IITs that had a evaluation of just 30 million 3 years ago, and has emerged into one of the strongest companies in AI in the US, and especially in the customer service experience. So that's kind of your role model and your examples. And candidly, you beat your competitors during the downturns. You don't beat them during the good times. During the good times, all of them grow. During the downturns, that's when the majority of my competitors got eliminated.
I have a lot of people who are asking you questions, and some of them are luminaries, really, of the industry, some powerful voices. My one question from Paritosh Joshi, a veteran in the industry, in the media and entertainment space, and he asks, in recent days, tech leaders like Zuckerberg have been at the center of controversies which are straining the social contract. How business balance between demands of consumer rights, particularly for privacy and government wishes? Is tech prepared to protect customers' privacy at all?
So, a series of about four really very fair questions. First is understand that my position in the industry, and let's go back to the 90s with the internet, where John Doerr, the lead of one of the top venture capitalist firms in America, and myself founded TechNet. We always focused on a very good, very transparent, open relationships with governments around the world, and understanding that while there were economic benefits in the company, there also were commitments to society. And so at Cisco, I built from the beginning a company that was the most valuable company in the world at one point in time. One that if you invested $1,000 when we went public, right before I joined, it would have been worth $157,000 when I left. We went from 70 million in sales to 48 billion on that. And yet we won every corporate social responsibility award in the world, from Democratic presidents and secretaries of state to Republicans, into India, into China, into Europe, Middle East, Russia. And we focused on the beginning about it's the benefit to both society and to government. And so when there are terrible, tough issues, the issues about Snowden and intelligence agencies misusing the internet, etc., governments around the world, including America's adversaries, actually trusted Cisco to navigate through this, and we navigated it through well. So I believe that the definition of capitalism is not the old world, where it's just about, do you make money? How do you do it most effectively? You owe an obligation to society and to both give back and to focus on privacy rights. I'm not going to talk about one individual versus another, but I believe that some of the large tech companies badly misexecuted on privacy. And the rules when the crisis management, don't hide, be very transparent, have trusting working relationships with the government, which you've already built, and find a way to achieve the goals of both. That would be my advice to the businesses today. But the old world definition of capitalism is gone. If companies don't strike a balance with the legitimate needs of citizens and governments on key issues, then governments will regulate you. And regulation, unfortunately, is coming to the high-tech industry for the companies that didn't change.
An interesting couple of questions coming your way, a slightly different tack. How important was spirituality or consciousness in your life in helping you tide over crisis situations?
Well, it's a series of questions. A lot of it is dependent upon the inner strengths and weaknesses of every individual. I'll use the example of a coach in purely physical training. My wife is a good athlete, and I'm a reasonably good athlete for a senior statesman. And I've never needed a coach, mainly because I'm driven extremely strong internally. You don't have to tell me I need to go run 3 miles. I go run 3 miles. You don't have to tell me that I have to swim or lift weights. I do that automatically. My wife needs somebody to help coach her through that. So if you're a person early on, be realistic to your strengths and limitations. And sometimes a coach can help. Sometimes they can actually hurt. It depends on the person. The inner spirituality, my basic view about culture and doing the right thing, regardless of your religion, and treating others like you respect. And all of us are equal in life. There is no difference based upon color, skin, religion, any other factor. We are all equal as we go forward. And I believe that so strongly. And it's a huge part of what I do. But to answer the question related back to the business, the culture of Cisco is one of the things I'm most proud of. The culture of just doing the right thing for our customers, making innovation happen. A family, I knew every illness of every employee, their spouse, or their kids. During the times of crisis, we were there for our employees like no one else. During the times of crisis, we were there for our customers like no one else. I took business risks doing that. Sometimes they worked, and sometimes they didn't, but we always emerged stronger. So it is that basic value system. I'm a far from perfect person, but the reason and my currency, as my customers would tell to me, and I can sell to any customer today that I've ever sold to over my whole career, because they trusted me. Trust is based upon track record, relationships, and that trust currency and transparency of the currency. So inner beliefs and focus on the future, absolutely. Is culture and communication as important as strategy and vision during downturns? Absolutely as well.
Sure. Another very interesting question coming in from Paritosh. I love the old world definition of capitalism is gone. Would love to understand what's the new definition from you.
The new definition is you owe an obligation both to your shareholders, but also to your employees, to your customers, to your partners, and to society at large. So think of them as two balancing. And the ones who do it right will do both very well. And for those who challenge, I'll go back to my point from before. First is at Cisco, we were the most successful at our point in time company ever. And yet we gave back to society and to our employees. We had the number one position with our customers in terms of customer satisfaction in the tech industry, number one position with our partners in terms of partnering. And even when competitors come at me and offer my partners huge amount of money to come with them, they stayed with me on that. So this new definition, I think, is the future, but a wake-up call for everybody listening. Before, it was a philosophy, which I believe strongly in. Now it's a requirement. If you don't balance your financial returns with how you treat your employees and how you treat society, government will regulate you and break you up. And it's a wake-up call to the large tech companies that if they continue down the path they were on before, there's going to be a rude awakening at the end.
John, given that so much importance has been given to tech, during this COVID-19 era, and we are seeing jobs being stripped because technology is taking over, how will this pan out? What are your predictions? New opportunities will emerge. Will this be the decline of labor markets?
So you've asked the most important question about what does the economy look like 5, 10, 15 years out. If you go with the current trends, and Sonali, it is going to result in a large number of jobs being destroyed. Let's use the US, where I'm very familiar with the numbers. In the US, probably 10 to 15 million jobs will be through automation, artificial intelligence, technology over the next decade. And we need about 25 million new jobs over the next decade for the labor force coming in. So you've got to create about 35 to 40 million jobs. To do that, the large companies in total will not add any headcount. They're actually going to reduce because of that automation we talked about and the use of technology, et cetera. So it says your startup engine, your small business engine getting bigger is so important to the future. And that's why it's so important to digitization of a country, digitization of a company in terms of the execution. It's why it's so important that the number of startups don't double or triple. They've got to go up in India probably fivefold, in the US probably threefold versus where they are today. A comparison would be during the 1990s, we had 2 to 3 times the number of IPOs that we currently have in America. And we added 22.5 million jobs during that decade. Real GDP growth was 34%. Per capita income of the country increased by an average of 24% for every household on average, regardless of geographic location. So if we do this right, and you become a startup nation in India, a startup nation in the US, then you come out of this dramatically stronger. Will there be a brutal number of startups left behind during the downturns? Unfortunately, yes, but it's then how you position the country for the future. And I personally believe that Prime Minister Modi is one of the top 3 leaders I've ever met in my life. His Digital India, Startup India, inclusive across 29 states, is something I very much believe in. I partner with France Macron, the president there. I'm his high-tech ambassador. Can you imagine the U.S. having a French high-tech ambassador or a German high-tech ambassador? Yet he's focused on how does he bring startups to all of his 12 regions in his country. And so this is what leadership is about, not playing the hand just to survive, but saying, what do we want to look like 3, 5, and 10 years out, and have the courage to make the tough decisions, which people will second guess you about as you move forward.
In downturns, typically women are the first to lose out, especially in markets such as India. How do you see that play out? And do you think it's possible to reverse the trend? Or I think she means damage control. Would you be in agreement with that statement? Because it is a gender statement. And if you do, how do we minimize that?
So first, I'm a Sheryl Sandberg fan. And when she wrote her book about leaning in, I was the first to get behind her and ask her to speak to our employees. And she spoke to our top 3,000 managers. And I sent a book out to each one of them and said, you must read the book. And before she talked, I looked at the audience and I said, this book is not about women leaning in. This book is about us men doing better. We have to be the ones leaning in. The way we treat minorities, the way we treat gender is not acceptable for the future. The best run companies in the world are the most diverse. And the most diverse, that's been shown again and again. And so in downturns, this is when you show the culture as a leader of your own company. If as a leader you say we're all equal, and we're equal on gender, we're equal on age, we're equal on religion, etc., then during the downturns, you treat people equally. And you judge them based upon their skill sets, not on other factors. And this is where you see leaders really show, are they really saying one thing and behave in a different way? There's nothing worse than a leader that says, here's my culture, except under pressure, they walk a different path. So do you walk the talk as a leader of what you said you would be going through it? Culture has more to do with coming through this downturn, how your employees view you on the upturn. This is when I think leaders have to do a gut check. Are you really what you say you are, or are you going to do it differently? Are you paying people equally based on equal responsibility?
I have to ask you a very personal question. Any
Okay.
point in your career, and you're a man with so much experience and such a diverse and colorful career, but has there ever been a point in your career where because of, let's say, tough times such as these, you almost gave up? You almost said, I am giving up? Because most of the business owners today feel like that. Was there a time where you were drowning and almost gave up and then recovered? I think if you could share a personal story of yours, I think that would be inspirational and also heartening for many to hear that it is possible.
Well, first, any leader who tells you they never had that feeling during really tough times is either too insensitive or not being honest with you. During the really tough times, all of us have that moment of doubt. If you don't, you're not human. I am dyslexic. That is a learning disability that was not understood when I was a young person. My parents were both doctors, and I'll come back to my mom in a moment on the gender issue follow-up. But they were trying to teach me how to read, and I read backwards. And fortunately, a teacher by the name of Mrs. Anderson helped me learn how to read and how to change. And so I went from my second and third grade teachers doubting I could go to college to I could make almost any grades I wanted except in English for it. And was there a moment I almost gave up? when kids would laugh at me in school when I was reading? Yes. And the frustrations were huge. The harder I tried, the worse I got. And once you learn your way through that, I now know I can deal with almost any crisis and you can help others. A young girl came up and take our children to work days about 12 years ago or 14 years ago at Cisco. And in front of about 500 people, she tried to ask a question and she had it written on a piece of paper and she tried to read it and she couldn't. And she broke down in tears and left, went off the stage crying and said, I'm dyslexic. I can't do this. I followed her off the stage and I'd never told anybody I was dyslexic. And I stopped and said, I am dyslexic too. I thought I'd left the microphone on stage. And I walked her through, you can see it emotionally affects me, what it was like, and here's how you deal with it. And I said, dyslexics can't read well, so don't read. Talk to me like I'm your friend. I want you to come back up, ask the question, look me in the eye and ask the question. Then I got up and the whole room was really quiet. And I realized that I had left my microphone on. I confessed to the world my weakness, my biggest fear. And I thought it was a mistake. As it turned out, it brought me closer to people, closer to that young person. We're all human. So yes, you have moments when you doubt. If you're not human. We're far from perfect beings. I had in 2001 sitting on the roof. Was I the right person to lead Cisco? And secondly, even if I was, did I want to go through the pain I was about to do with laying off people, making the tough decisions? I knew I was going to get clobbered in the press. I knew people who were my friends were going to turn on me. And that is very lonely. Is there a thought about giving up? Perhaps for a moment. But however, once I decide I'm going forward, those thoughts are gone. And I focus with no fear. And I do believe in leading with no fear. I don't think there's anybody in the world above me or below me. But boy, when I take on a competitor or lead a company through it, I honestly believe we're unbeatable. Were there moments of doubt starting into it? Yes. Will there be moments of doubt for everyone in your audience? Absolutely. And then it's where you learn about your inner self and your inner direction. So it's for all of us.
Okay. Question coming in from TCM Sundaram, again, high-flying venture capitalist, founder and managing director of Chirate. And he asks, could you please talk about what's going to happen in terms of suspension of H-1B visas and J-1 visas to combat US job losses? How will the IT majors manage as many as 100K Indians, as they're all mostly on H-1B visas? It's a tough one.
Chirate is a very good venture capital firm. They actually are an investor in Unifor as well as I am, and they're very good friends on it. In terms of the issue about H-1B visas, my view on this is extremely strong, that our countries should be the most strategic partnership between the two of them in the world. And that's why I'm chairman of the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum. That this country, the U.S., should staple a green card to every graduating student who makes good grades in technology or otherwise, and that we're a country that is founded on immigration. Over 50% of my startups are, actually 60%, have at least one founding member, interestingly enough, of Indian ancestry, either first or second generation. 55% of our top companies in this nation are were done by founders who were immigrants in. So we have to fix this. It's a controversial time and a controversial period with our elections coming up. And during elections, as everybody knows, things kind of get out of kilter a little bit.
The last question comes from Sunil Lulla. He's also a luminary and the CEO of Bark India. And he's asking, it's the positive mindset and positive direction which trees and businesses. What are those lessons of positivity we can learn from to veer us out of this crisis?
I think it's hard to be optimistic, cautiously optimistic, and to dream during the tough times. But I think you actually have to dream. Once you deal with the situation the way it is, then you have to dream what the future looks like. And I'm a believer in making dreams come true is what a leader is all about. I think India's future is unbelievably bright. I think a decade from now, the vast majority of Indians will have a dramatic increase in terms of their pay. I think you'll see your startup engine take off. I think you'll see much more inclusiveness by geography and across the whole country, and the results being very strong. But you have to have dreamers who make that happen. I believe you have that in your prime minister, and then you've got to have people that can execute off of it. And so I actually see a much more vibrant India a decade from now. And I see India leapfrogging even China in terms of its acceleration, in terms of job creation, acceleration in terms of per capita income, acceleration hopefully in the US and India working together for both economic and trade, but also for the benefit of every employee. Am I a dreamer? Oh, yeah. Do I make dreams come true? I believe in
Oh, yeah.
doing that, but I do it with my friends.
Thank you so much, Owen. Truly appreciate it. Have a great day, and thank you very much for having this conversation.
It's been an honor being with you today.